Hello there, fellow truth seekers. This is Doug coming to you once again on this here Shabbat. I hope all of you been blessed and had a good week. Of course, I'm still kind of, I guess you could call it a debate. I mean, I don't know about the nature of man's evil, or carnality or carnal minds and stuff. That it's that is really what Satan and the serpent and the dragon and all that represents. It's not really literal entities or anything. But I kind of, one of the scriptures that they use is out of Isaiah 45, 5 through 13, and I'll go there and just, and by the way, I'm thankful for all you folks and for the people who subscribe. I'm thankful for the comments. I mean, I'm not opposed to hearing what other people have to say. I try to have I try to be a good Berean. I try to be, have a open mind about these things and to listen to what other people have to say. And then I pray over it and I go study the scriptures and see. Like here in Isaiah 5 through 13, it says, this is Isaiah chapter 45. And of course, I've read this before on here on a different subject, but when I was talking about there is no other Elohim, that he is, Yahuwah Elohim. It says, I am Yahuwah, and there is none else. There's no Elohim beside me. I girded thee, though thou hast not known me, that they may know from the rising of the sun and from the west that there is none beside me. I am Yahuwah, and there is none else. I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and create evil. Now, it doesn't say he, does evil. It says he creates evil. Okay, and of course, he can influence our minds for us to do evil. But doesn't preclude that there are other entities that he has also created. I guess you just have to say angels or malach, messengers, which is what they're called in the Hebrew, malach or malachim. I guess I don't know what kind of a metaphor they are. Maybe are the righteous side of our conscience or whatever. But if you look, in here, he talks about that, don't strive with him. If you're going to strive, pot shard against pot shard. In other words, us against each other or whatever, but don't strive against him. But that doesn't also preclude that there are ones that want to present themselves as being creators or being Elohim. But in Genesis, and I've talked about this before, and listen to what it says here, Genesis chapter 3, it says, now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field which Yahuwah Elohim had made. Okay, so if that represents our carnal mind, it's saying it's a beast of the field, which he had made. And he said unto the woman, yea, hath God said unto you. He's speaking to her. So what is this, her mind, her carnal mind speaking to her? And the woman said unto the serpent, we may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree of which is in the midst of the garden, God has said, ye shall not eat of it, neither shall ye touch it, lest ye die. And the serpent said unto the woman, Ye shall not surely die. For Elohim doth know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and you shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. And of course, we did. I mean, once they did eat it, I mean, they, began to know the difference between good and evil. And then then that did create this duality of conscience. One part of us wanting to do right, and one part of us that doesn't want to do right. And as Paul said, that the flesh strives against the spirit, because our flesh likes pleasure. I mean, that's a given. I mean, we like pleasure, more than we like righteousness, as the rule. But it doesn't preclude that there are influences that try to influence us. I mean, of course, it could just be God himself that is, that tempts us. But he says that he doesn't tempt us. He says, I cannot be tempted, and neither do I tempt. But we're tempted when we begin to lust. But does he put temptations out in front of us? He says he doesn't. Now, of course, men do. But are they being enticed or influenced to do so? Or is it just what they create in their own minds? Maybe a combination of the two. But, like when Christ, of course, I can look at Job again. I mean, Job is, and of course, according to them, that Job realized that this is just his carnal mind. It says, now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before Yahweh, and Satan came also among them. Okay, well, what are these sons of God? I mean, Christ told us that when they were asking him about marriage in heaven and stuff, he says, you're neither married nor given in marriage, but you are going to be like the angels. They don't procreate. They don't procreate. Well, what are the angels? The Malach. I mean, are they literal entities? Or are they just a metaphor? Because there's certainly a whole lot of scripture about it. I mean, about them. The ones that came to Lot there and got him to come out. And he's, here again in chapter 2, he does it again after he's not able to get Lot to curse God or whatever. That's, you take his stuff from him and he ain't going to do it, but let me put an affliction on him or whatever, and he will. And of course, so this Satan is some man whose conscience is conversing with God. I mean, that is conversing back and forth. Or is it that once man ate of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, he just became a, Satan, an adversary? And so that his conscience was coming before Elohim or whatever. I guess you could argue it either way. That it's a literal entity or entities that have rebelled against him, just like we did. And or that it's just, what was it? Some kind of a default in our mind. that led us to that? I mean, to eat, or was it literally a tree that they ate from, or was that a metaphor? I know according to Bullinger, and he wrote a book on the 217 figures of speech that are in the scriptures, and like the giants there in Numbers, whenever they came down there to the promised land, and Moses sent spies into the land, and they come back, 10 of them with a bad report, and 2 of them said, come and let's go take the land. Well, but according to Bullinger, these giants were really just a giant disbelief, is what he basically says it is. It's not really that there were really physical giants there, but that it was just they had a giant disbelief or unbelief. But scripturally, I mean, that's they say the same thing about Goliath. He was just a lack of unbelief by the Hebrews, but that David, had the belief, and so were able to overcome them, the Philistines or whatever. But over and again, I mean, it talks about these giants, going back to Genesis chapter 6, verse 4, and about these B'nai Ha-Elohim, these sons of God that came down here and mated with human women. What is that a metaphor for? Or what figure of speech covers that? And of course, 2 Peter and the book of Jude, they both say specifically that these were angels, created beings, that were supposed to be watching us and observing us after our fall. And of course, they themselves fell into deception. They were deceived also by these Satans. And again, he says he creates the evil. So if he created these entities that are evil, that perpetrate evil, then, it's just like with Ahab, where he said, which one of you will go down, and be a lion spirit in the mouth of his prophets? And one said, I'll go and be, I'll be a lion spirit in the mouth of his prophets. So, I mean, that's the thing that I don't really understand. That the point they're trying to make is that he's saying that he's sending these, and the angel of the Lord, and different ones, and of course the angel of the Lord is, according to the Hebrews, in the Hebrew, when you go and look the word up, that it could have been Elohim manifesting as this angel of the Lord, or it could have been a pre-incarnate appearance of Christ. And of course, when we read the Gospel of John, the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and became flesh. So obviously was pre-existent. And so you obviously have these appearances, and I mean, is it just Elohim appearing all these different times as Michael, as Gabriel, and these other entities, other angels or whatever, the ones that went there to Lot, the two that went to Lot, the one that came to Mary, the one that came to Elizabeth, the mother of John the Baptist. If he created us in his likeness and in his image, what's to say that, he hasn't created other beings and other, entities, and when you read in the book of Enoch, he talks about the luminaries and the stars, that they, and he tells us back there in Isaiah 45, he says that he commands, let me get back to it here. It says, I have made the earth and created man upon it. Even my hands have stretched out the heavens, and all their host have I commanded. So, talking about these Malachim, the stars, there he describes them in Job, just, where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth, and the morning stars sang for, joy, and the sons of God shouted, which means they were here before us, before the world was created. And of course everything has its existence in him. He sustains everything. It says there in John chapter 9, it says all things are, sustained by him and held together by him. And Paul talks about that too. But that doesn't mean that we're not actually separate entities. Yes, our life comes from him. It says there, in Genesis, he breathed the breath of life in the man and he became a living soul. But we became a living soul, a physical being. But I believe that initially they were flesh and bone. They were not flesh and blood. Just like when Christ, he appeared before, up there with his disciples, he just appeared. And Thomas, says, come and feel me. They thought he was a spirit or something. He says, come and feel me. He says, a spirit doesn't have flesh and bone. He never said nothing about no blood. Flesh and bone. And that's what we'll be whenever we are changed. We'll be flesh and bone. No longer flesh, because life is, physical life is in the blood. This kind of life that we're existing in right now is in the blood. You lose all your blood and see if you don't die. But once you are transformed into immortality, you're no longer going to have that blood. And because Paul talks about that too. He says that flesh and blood shall not enter the kingdom of heaven. Flesh and blood. But anyway, but going back to the giants, and basically what I'm talking about here is metaphorical figures of speech in the Bible. Well, they have found giant skeletons all over the place. And over there, I think they found the bed of King Og of Bashan that was over there at Gilgal Raphaim, which Raphaim is, Walking Dead. And the, Og of Bashan was one of the sons of Anak, and they were a whole tribe of giants. and he was the last of them. And of course Moses and them killed him. And of course, according to Mr. Bullinger, that was just they killed this disbelief. And but over there in India, they found footprints over there that are like 3 and 4 feet long footprints. And they even purportedly have a skeleton over there in a museum that's 36 feet tall. And they're all over the earth. There's evidence, all over the earth of these giants. And here in America, in the 1880s, 1890s, it was in every newspaper, even Abraham Lincoln, back when he was still alive, which is even earlier, witnessed and saw these giant skeletons up there in Illinois, and them burial mounds up there, and them burial mounds in Indiana, and over in Ohio, and down into Kentucky. They're all over the place. And then the Smithsonian came in and began to gather up all this stuff and haul it off and dump it out into the ocean to try and discredit this. The fact that there were literally physical giants. And Christ in Matthew chapter 24, verse 37 says it's going to be just like it was in the days of Noah. And we already see it happening. The corrupting of the human genetics. Same thing that was going on back then. But I guess that's all metaphorical, because this guy, I consider him a friend, but we debate this stuff. He's sort of a Gnostic. And I know Gnostic, means knowledge or whatever, but I'm talking about people who practice Gnosticism. And so we kind of debate. And one of them is that he don't believe there was a flood. He believes that it was a metaphor for a flood of evil. Okay? But yet the geological evidence for it all over the world, I've been out west on numerous occasions, and I can tell you what, you go out around the Grand Canyon and the Great Basin and the Petrified Forest and the Painted Desert, yeah, it's obvious flood damage. Everywhere as far as you can see. And so, and all over the world. There's evidence for it all over the world. The story of it is in over 40 different cultures that have a similar story. Yeah, they tell it a little bit differently, but it's the same thing. The Epic of Gilgamesh and the American Indians have the same similar story. The Chinese, the Japanese, the Russians. All of them. The Middle Easterners. They all have these flood stories. And they found Noah's Ark in the mounts of Ararat. They've located it, and it measures exactly 300 cubits. And down in the ground, there's even an area down in there, if they could dig down in there, there's still in the center of it compartments in there. They can use ground penetrating LiDAR to detect it. They can look down in there with that LiDAR, and they can actually see these different levels in there, and in the center of it where it hadn't really been exposed to the earth and stuff, it's still intact. And but the thing that Christ was talking about, and of course is in the book of Enoch, the extra biblical text, and I would say, as I've said before, I give credence to the book of Enoch. Now the part in there that's about Noah and all that stuff, which that was just added in there. It was some fragments that were found along with that copy of Enoch over there in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and they just threw them fragments in there. But that I take with a grain of salt. But the book of Enoch itself, it pretty much, the one they found there in Qumran goes, matches up with what the one in the Ethiopian Coptic Bible, what it has to say in there. They got a copy of it. It was at one time the only copy known to exist until they found the ones there at Qumran. And Enoch, he gives great detail about these entities and the mischief that they were up to. And they had names. I've given them to you. I've actually went in there and given them to you. And then in the book of Jude, he quotes it directly. So obviously, at that period of time, they were familiar with it and had read it. And he tells us in there that it was written for the end, the latter days, for future time. It wasn't for the people during the time of Moses and during the time of Christ and all that. No, it was for our time, to give us heads up about this stuff, and that we're gonna see some really strange stuff, and we're all it already is, and of course I've said this too, like with the weather modification and all that stuff, just knowledge that we've been given and allowed to have, because we think we know better than Elohim about how to control the weather and all that. So he allowed them to have that capability, that knowledge. And of course we're seeing the results of it. And this Pope, I believe, false prophet, is going around, and they are really pushing this Sunday Sabbath thing, but they're calling it Earth Sabbath. That we need to give the earth a day of rest to combat climate change. So, and he's going to the United Nations and to, global, leaders of countries. And there's even, been talk in our own Congress over here about doing the exact same thing, reenacting what used to be called blue laws or whatever, Sunday Sabbath. And so, I think, and then, like I said, these UFOs that people are seeing everywhere, and increasing in number. I mean, they're in Zechariah, here in chapter 5, and I've talked about this before. It says, "Then I turned and lifted up mine eyes and looked, and behold, a flying roll. And he said unto me, What seest thou? And I answered, I see a flying roll. The length thereof is 20 cubits, and the breadth thereof 10 cubits. Then said he unto me, This is the curse that goeth forth over the face of the whole earth. For every one that stealeth shall be cut off as on this side according to it, and every one that sweareth shall be cut off as on that side according to it. I will bring it forth, saith Yahweh of hosts, and it shall enter into the house of the thief, and into the house of him that sweareth falsely by my name, and it shall remain in the midst of his house, and shall consume it with the timber thereof and the stones thereof. Then the Malachim that talked with me went forth, or Malach, talked with me, and went forth and said unto me, Lift up now thine eyes, and see what is this that goeth forth. And I said, What is it? And he said, This is an ephah that goeth forth. He said, Moreover, this is their resemblance through all the earth. And an ephah, if you go back, it was a container that held 1 ephah of wheat. It was, if you filled this up, that was an ephah, a measurement. Just like we have pecks and half bushels and bushels and that kind of stuff. Well, they had an ephah, and it was shaped like these flying saucers. And people are seeing them all over the world, and even the governments of the world now are coming out and admitting that these things are around. And then, what about demonic entities? These disembodied spirits of the Nephilim, those giants back before the flood, that's talked about there in that wander around. You know, what about the demonic entities, the demoniac, like the one there at Gadara? And this entity, you know, said, I know who you are. I mean, how did he know this? How did he know that the Messiah was who he was? It says, you are Jesus of Nazareth. Have you come to torment us before our time? And he asked him who he was, and he said, we are called Legion, for we are many. Okay, so this man was possessed by a legion of demonic entities. And they were cast out of him, and they went into the herd of swine, and they ran into the sea down there and drowned themselves. I want to know what the metaphor for that is. Explain it to me, since it's over my head. But you know, these, you know, and Christ was casting them out, and so were the disciples going around. I mean, they're in Matthew. They went out, and then when he come back, I think it's or not Matthew, but Luke. In the book of Luke, let's see, Luke 1 through 4, 1 through 13. And this is where Christ went out and was tempted of the devil. In those days he did eat nothing, and when they were ended, he afterward was hungered, and the devil said unto him. So I guess his mind was talking to him. And if thou be the Son of God, command this stone that it be made bread. And Yahushua answered him, saying, it is written that man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word of Elohim. And the devil, taking him up into an high mountain, showed unto him all the kingdoms of the world in a moment of time. And the devil said unto him, all this power will I give thee, and the glory of them, for that is delivered unto me, and to whomsoever I will give it. If thou therefore wilt worship me, all shall be thine. And Yahushua answered and said unto him, get thee behind me, Satan, for it is written, thou shalt worship Yahweh thy Elohim, and him only shalt thou serve. And he brought him to Jerusalem, and set him on a pinnacle of the temple, and said unto him, if thou be the Son of Elohim, cast thyself down from hence. For it is written, he shall give his angels charge over thee, to keep thee. And in their hands they shall bear thee up, lest at any time thou dash thy foot against a stone. And Jesus answered and said, thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God, or Yahweh Elohim. And when the devil had ended all the temptation, he departed from him for a season. For a season. And Yahushua returned in the power of the Spirit unto Galilee. And so, you know, I mean, he's literally, it appears, contending with this adversary. And then in Luke chapter 10, and verse 17, and this is when he had sent the disciples out, and it says, and the 70 returned again with joy, saying, Adonai, even the devils are subject unto us through thy name. And he said unto them, I beheld Satan as lightning fall from heaven. Behold, I give unto you power to tread on serpents and scorpions, and over all the power of the enemy, and nothing shall be by any means hurt you. Notwithstanding in this rejoice not, that the spirits are subject unto you, but rather rejoice because your names are written in heaven. So, is it talking about human spirits that are subject to them? Or is it talking about these demonic spirits? that they're casting out. You know, it says even the devils are subject unto us. And you know, behold, I beheld Satan as lightning fall from heaven. So, if our carnal minds are Satan, the devil, Beelzebub, the dragon, the serpent, how could you see it cast down from heaven like lightning? And then 2 Corinthians here, I forgot the marker there, but I can find it pretty easy enough. 2 Corinthians 12, and let's see, 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 7 through 10, and this is where, you know, Paul had a messenger of Satan. It says, unless I should be exalted above measure through the abundance of the revelations. In other words, when he was out there in the wilderness, and when he got struck down going to Damascus, and he was out there, and Yahushua was revealing the gospel and all that to him, and about the kingdom. It says, and lest I should be exalted above measure through the abundance of the revelations, there was given to me a thorn in the flesh, the messenger of Satan to buffet me, lest I should be exalted above measure. For this thing I besought the Lord thrice, that it might depart from me. And he said unto me, my grace is sufficient for thee, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. Most gladly, therefore, will I rather glory in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. And I agree that the Jews really persecuted Paul. I mean, and what's to say that they're not the messenger of Satan, that they are under Satan's control, or they yielded to him, or the adversary, the messenger of the adversary, to buffet me, lest I should be exalted above measure. And they did. I mean, they beat him a bunch of times. I mean, we can, you read about his travels. I mean, but it wasn't just them. I mean, the Gentiles, some of them give him a hard time too, especially there whenever, he was in Ephesus, and, they worshiped Diana, and he basically upset their whole paradigm, with his message, and people quit buying their idols and all that stuff, and it really threw them into a frenzy, and so they were out to kill him. So it wasn't just the Jews alone. I mean, it was, the messenger of Satan was going all around, because most of Paul's travel, because, like they're in Ephesus and in Corinth and Galatia and all that, they were synagogues there. The Jews had synagogues all over the place, because they were trying to convert people over to, to their belief system. And like there, I think it was in Galatia there, where Paul was preaching there in the synagogue, and those people wanted him to keep coming back on the Sabbath, and come back on the Sabbath and teach us. And even, and he even convinced a lot of them Jews there too, but some of them didn't, they didn't, and they would go, they would go back to Jerusalem there to the high priest and them down there, and they tell him, well, that Paul, he's a turncoat. You need to, if you can, grab him up and bring him down here, and we'll take revenge on him, basically. And so they they became messengers of Satan. And even became the synagogue. A lot of them became the synagogue of Satan, which I have a different take on that too. I believe it's the Ashkenazis, but that's neither here nor there on this. But then in 2 Thessalonians 2:8-12, and then shall that wicked be revealed, whom Yahweh shall consume with the spirit of his mouth, and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming, even him whose coming is after the working of Satan, with all power and signs and lying wonders, and with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in them that perish, because they receive not the love of the truth, that they might be saved. And for this cause Elohim shall send them strong delusions, that they should believe a lie, that they all might be damned who believe not the truth, but have pleasure in unrighteousness. But we are bound to give thanks always to Elohim for you, brethren, beloved of Yahweh, because Elohim have from the beginning chosen you to salvation through sanctification of the Spirit and belief of the truth. And I agree that, that the battle is for our minds. I've said that before. For those few of you that actually do follow what I say, I've never said that it wasn't. That, Paul in Romans, he talks about doing, the thing I would do, I do not, and the thing which I would not do, that I do, in the battle of the flesh against the spirit, and that's why he said, let the mind that was in Yahushua also be in you. What mind was that? Well, it was the mind of Elohim, the mind of God. But also, he tells us, he says that my ways are not your ways. My thoughts are not your thoughts. But he wants us to bring our thoughts into alignment with his. And he explains that here, we can see in Scripture what his thoughts are and how his ways are. And then Christ came and lived an example of it for us to follow. And that's what I believe sanctification is the rooting out of the carnality of the mind. That's why it says, be in the world but not of the world, because the world is the physical image of carnality. It's the physical manifestation of carnality, or of the carnal mind. Because we have pretty much created a world that follows our own carnal minds. But that's not to say that there isn't influences that God himself created, because he tells us he doesn't tempt us. And in the Lord's Prayer, he tells us, lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. And so, so I guess this guy, even him whose coming is after the working of the carnal mind, with all power and signs and lying wonders. And it talks about that, and of course I know we got technology, we've got, pretty advanced stuff, and some stuff that's even beyond what we understand that we have. It's not revealed to us and all that stuff. And the ability to call fire down from heaven, that's not impossible, now with the technology that we have. And then the advancement of AI and these supercomputers and all that kind of stuff, these exascale computers and all that. But when we look back at Genesis, and there in Enoch, he talks about how these entities were given man, forbidden knowledge. They were giving them the knowledge of technology and stuff like that. That's how they built all these great big structures and all. Because I do believe that the pyramids in Baalbek and the Pumapunku and all these other great monolithic structures, survived the flood because of their massiveness, and they were probably, a lot of it, built by these Nephilim giants, I think that we're going to see a return of that stuff. We already are seeing it. I mean, in that, it tells us there in Genesis that, in Genesis 6, that Noah was perfect in his generations, in his genetics. So what actually, where did they get that knowledge to mix animals and humans and humans and animals, and to alter the DNA to where the whole earth had become corrupted? And then it wasn't just sin corruption. It was genetic corruption. And it wasn't just animals. It was plants. It was insects. It was everything. They were corrupting everything genetically. And they were mixing animals and animals, different species of animals together. And they were mixing humans and animals. And I think there in Jasher, the book of Jasher, it talks about them creating like a subhuman called an Eloi or something like that hated humans and was eating humans when they could when they could get a hold of them and stuff, and they would have, Noah and his family, they would have destroyed them if they could have, but they were protected. And so and of course there in Isaiah it says that he is, Elohim and there is no other. And, but it still does not eliminate, because we exist, we're here. Are we just a thought in Elohim's mind, like a matrix? Or are we actually physical beings that exist, that have existence? I'm just asking you a question here, posing it to you folks. Everybody's got their own opinion and their own thoughts on it. What does it mean? Is it a metaphor? Are we just, like in a video game? That we're just avatars, thoughts? Or are we actual physical beings? With feelings? And that we have to, ultimately we've got to disassociate ourselves from the physical and be led by the spiritual, by the mind of Elohim and Yahushua and the Ruach HaKodesh. And that's why I think, it's talking about not being in the world, but being out, in the world, but not of the world. Because the world is carnality. And our minds, being carnal too, tend to gravitate towards, things that are carnal. But is all that an illusion? All the things that we see around us in the world, is it an illusion? A projection? Or is it real? My friend, he just seems to think it's all, that it's all an illusion. It's just all an illusion, and like a mirage or something, and you have to break out of it and realize that it's just a mirage, and that nothing's ever went wrong. But he talks about some kind of mist and all that stuff, that the archons and all that. Well, if there's archons or whatever, again, these influences, what are they? What's this mist? That somehow or another that mist caused us to have this separation of thought. The good and evil. I'm like everybody. I'm trying to find the truth, and I read the scriptures, and of course you can make it all to be just a bunch of metaphors and figures of speech, or that a lot of it is literal. There is a lot of metaphors and similes and similitudes and stuff. He tells us that he sometimes speaks to us in similitudes. Sometimes. Not everything. And prophecy, when everything's actually come to pass, actual events, well, that can't be a metaphor if it actually happens. Or a figure of speech. When, the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem twice, once by the Babylonians and once by the Romans, physical temples, physical buildings. And the Jews, I don't think that, they might try to build a temple over there, but, when it talks about the Antichrist there here in Thessalonians, who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he as God sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. And of course, Paul says this is a temple here, and it's that he goes into the holy place. Well, just like there during the time of Ezra, whenever he returned to begin the work of rebuilding the temple, they took and got a red heifer and they burned it and got the ashes and they cleansed the platform there where the temple had been, and they called that the holy place, because it was a long time before they actually built that temple. It didn't just, it was 20 or 30 years building it back. And because they had a lot of adversaries trying to stop them the whole time, the Arabs and different ones around there, Amalekites and stuff, Amorites. They were still around there, and they were trying to prevent them, and they were writing letters back to Xerxes or Artaxerxes, back to him, saying, oh, they're here trying to build the walls back to rebel against you. And of course they, Nehemiah, he was given permission to go back and begin to build the walls of Jerusalem, and by Xerxes, and even funded, he even funded it. And so, he wrote a letter back to him telling him, that's not what we're doing. We're doing what you told me I could come here and do. And of course, Xerxes shut them down, them people that were opposed to him. But I just pray, that not to be deceived, to know the truth, be shown the truth, and I'm going to keep studying. I'm going to keep praying. And, like Christ said, in Matthew 24, pray that, or Luke 21, pray that you be counted worthy to escape these things and to stand before the Son of Man. We can see these things that, prophetic events that are falling into place. And I believe next year is going to really be prophetic. And you see this, and like I said, I believe this Pope is the false prophet because he's going around trying to get this what I call it, what I believe is the mark of the beast, this Sunday worship. But they're using the environment and the climate change argument to do it, and which is that's become a religion in itself. But they're trying to unite all the religions of the world under this environmental mantra, and the United Nations is on board with it, because they're pushing this environmental agenda, and so is the World Economic Forum, and the European Union, and just everywhere they're pushing it, and they just they've created that deception to justify implementing these things, and part of it is of course, to get rid of all fossil fuels. And can you imagine if you get rid of all these fossil fuels? I mean, these people will freeze to death in certain areas, like up in Canada and over in Russia and Northern Europe and places like that. What are these people going to do? And then all of that, but how are you going to produce enough food for all the people if you don't have machines and all to go out and plow fields and harvest all this stuff? And then not to mention the fact that they're trying to do away with small farmers and stuff. So if you're not going to be allowed to grow your own food, well, they're going to have these factories that are going to be producing synthetic food, genetically modified or genetically produced foods. And then when you look at the agenda of the transhumanists that want to basically turn us into cyborgs, and alter us, that's what they said, wouldn't you like to have the vision of a hawk, or the strength of a bull, or the speed of a cheetah? Well, let us genetically alter you, and you can. Or wouldn't you like your children to be, what they call Artilect, with exceedingly advanced or exceedingly powerful cognitive ability, ability to learn, like a superhuman. And their argument is, wouldn't a parent want their children to have every advantage if they could? And so the very same thing that was going on back there in Genesis is already starting, and I believe it's literal. I don't believe it's no metaphor. I believe the very thing that was going on back then is going to be going on now, and you're going to see monsters. I mean, I think it's in the book of 2nd Ezra. It talks about women giving birth to monsters. Same thing that was going on back there in Genesis 6. And and I believe that stuff is literal. I mean, I see it going on with my own eyes. Now, my eyes might be deceiving me. I might be under a strong delusion. But when you see the technology that they have, CRISPR and CRISPR-Cas9, where they can go in there and splice animal genes into humans, sounds pretty close to what was going on there in the book of Jasher and in the book of Enoch. Exactly what they were doing back then. And that's the reason Elohim destroyed the earth with a flood. It wasn't because of their wickedness, because if that was the case, he would have already destroyed us, or be getting ready to. No, it was more to it than just that. They were, corrupting his creation. Because there, when you read it, everything he created, he saw was good. And so they began immediately upon their fall, and upon the appearance of these B'nai Ha-Elohim, these sons of God, that came down there on Mount Hermon, and there's even a plaque up there with their, and this thing's old, that supposedly has the oath on it that they took to do what they did, and to begin to teach man forbidden knowledge. And one of the things that they taught them was the mixing of humans and animals, and the mixing of animals and humans, and different animals together and all that stuff. I mean, all these depictions you see in ancient petroglyphs and hieroglyphs and reliefs and stelas and all that stuff all over the world was real. And I believe we're going to see that stuff again. We're going to see this the very same thing. Not, and who's to say that they don't already have these abominations made? And over in Germany, they've developed these incubators over there. I think that they can raise, a baby. They can take a baby out of, an egg or whatever, and put it in this incubator, or take a fetus, a little small fetus, and put it inside of these incubators and raise them in it. So, I mean, what would stop them from taking one of these abominations that they took human DNA and animal DNA and they mix it together and they put it in there and, put it in an egg, take some animal's DNA and some human's DNA and splice it and do it in such a way to where it won't reject it, because they said they already can do that. The British did it back in 2012. They said that they created over 150 chimeras, and they all were able to stay viable. So, and I believe if they were able to do that then, they probably already brought some of them to full term and to full complete, to where they are, like that movie Species, where, I believe that kind of stuff is programming to get us used to it, to the idea of doing this stuff. And so, I mean, and when you look at these people that are in government and all that stuff, I mean, they are, you can look and see what they're doing and what's going on and judge for yourself. It's insane. And, like I said, they're mixing the seed. They're in Daniel chapter 2. They shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave to one another, even as clay does not mix with iron. Well, who is this they that are mingling themselves with the seed of men? Obviously it can't be men, because it's it's the they mixing themselves with the seed of men. So have they been doing this all along? And back there in Genesis, the seed war, the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent. Is that obviously the seed of the woman was Messiah. So, who's this seed of the serpent? Is that just a carnal mind? If it was, if they'd already fallen and had a carnal mind, it would seem to me that there wouldn't need to be no seed. And the woman was the one that had partaken of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, Eve. So, I mean, just asking some questions there. And of course, you know, there in Isaiah where he says he creates the evil. So, I mean, does that preclude the ability to create evil entities? I don't know. Or is it just the evil that's in our minds? So, but anyway, I just wanted to kind of bring that out. Y'all can do with it as whatever you will. But I have almighty that before it's all said and done, and of course I'm not one of these rapture people that think you're going to be carried out of here, you know, in some kind of secret rapture. I believe that we're going to go through this tribulation and we're going to see this stuff. And we're going to see even, you know, crazier stuff than we're already seeing. And of course there in Revelation chapter 12, and of course in Revelation 12, you know, verse 7 through 17, and there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels, and prevailed not. Neither was their place found any more in heaven. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. Now I could see if you know, if our minds are really just, you know, the devil and Satan and the dragon and all that's just a metaphor for the carnal mind, but what about these angels? I mean, what are they? And I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, now has come salvation and strength, and the kingdom of our Elohim, and the power of his Christ, for the accuser of our brethren is cast down, which accused them before our Elohim day and night. And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, and they loved not their lives unto the death. Therefore rejoice, ye heavens, and ye that dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea, for the devil is come down unto you, having great wrath, because he knoweth that he hath but a short time. And when the dragon saw that he was cast unto the earth, he persecuted the woman which brought forth the man-child, talking about Israel. And to the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place, where she is nourished for a time and times and a half time, which is 3.5 years, from the face of the serpent. And the serpent cast out of his mouth water as a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away of the flood. Now, the flood, I believe, represents an army or whatever that is going to be after the believers. And the dragon was wroth with the woman, and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of Elohim, and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. And of course, you know, over there in Israel, I believe there is a remnant of true Jews, true Hebrew Jews, that, you know, the remnant of her seed, that are over there, and that we're seeing the birthing pains of that going on right now. And I mean, I was listening to Jonathan Cahn, and of course he's Jewish, but he's a Messianic Jew. He believes in Christ, And he said they call it the SAR, which is the same thing when you look in Daniel about the Prince of Persia. And Gabriel was being hindered by this Prince of Persia for 21 days. And he said only Michael stood with him in this opposition that he had there with the Prince of Persia. Well, this Prince of Persia, and it's just like the king of Tyre, it's talking about two different entities there. It's talking about the literal king of Tyre, the physical king of Tyre, and then it's talking about this entity that is ruling over Tyre. Same thing there with, Persia. That because at that time, Daniel, I think, was in Persia. He was in Medo-Persia. This is after the fall of Babylon. And so this power, this serpent power, this dragon power, whatever, moved from Babylon to Medo-Persia. And so that power was trying to prevent Gabriel from delivering this message to Daniel. So, was that just Daniel's own mind trying to prevent this message from getting through to his mind? To me, it sounds like it was an actual, literal confrontation going on, and that he needed the assistance of Michael to overcome this adversary. So, and then here in Revelation chapter 20, verses 1 through 10, and I saw an angel come down from heaven having the key of the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand, and he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years, and cast him into the bottomless pit, and shut him up, and set a seal upon him, that he should deceive the nations no more, till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled, and after that he must be loosed a little season. Okay, so, and I saw thrones, and they sat upon them, and judgment was given unto them. And I saw the souls of them that were beheaded for the witness of Jesus, and for the word of Elohim, and which had not worshipped the beast, neither his image, neither had received his mark upon their foreheads or in their hands, and they lived and reigned with Christ 1,000 years. But the rest of the dead lived not again until the 1,000 years were finished. This is the first resurrection. Blessed and holy is he that hath part in the first resurrection. On such the second death hath no power. But they shall be priests of Elohim and of Christ, and shall reign with him 1,000 years. And when the 1,000 years are expired, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison, and shall go out to deceive the nations which are in the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together to battle, the number of whom is as the sand of the sea. And they went up on the breadth of the earth, and compassed the camp of the saints about, and the beloved city, and fire came down from Elohim out of heaven, and devoured them. And the devil that deceived them was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are, and shall be tormented day and night forever and ever. So, there you have that. And it keeps referring to it as a him and a he. So do with it what you will. just wanted to point out these scriptures, and like I said, you can do with it as you will, and anybody else. But that's all I got to say about that, and I ain't saying nothing else about it. And I'm done debating, and I'll get into something different, and if Yahuwah is willing, the next Shabbat I'll focus on something else, because I'm getting a little burnt out on this. But anyway, you can study it, you can believe whatever you want. Like I said, you can read there in 2 Peter and in Jude that they, these angels left their first estate, and come down here and done a bunch of mischief. And so you can read that, in 2 Peter, and you can read it in the book of Jude, and which I encourage you to study it and make of it what you will. And so with that, I love you folks. I hope you be blessed. Be good Bereans. Listen to what I gotta say, but you do your own homework, your own study, and come to your own conclusions. I can't do it for you. You can't do it for me. And I'll listen to what people have to say. You can leave comments and say whatever you want. I'll read them and listen to what you got to say, and then I'll make up my own mind. But and that's what I tell you to do. Don't believe what I tell you. Just do your own study and let the Ruach lead you. Let him give you insight and the truth. That's why he was sent, was to lead us to truth. And so with that, I'm going to call it a day. And if the Lord is, if Yahuwah is willing, I'll see you again on the next Shabbat.